Welcome to another Pirkei Avot text explication. We are now starting the third chapter. So we are on the very first text in the third chapter of Pirkei Avot. And this starts off with a figure named Akavia ben Mehalalel. Now, what's interesting about Akavia ben Mehalalel is he rarely and quite infrequently appears in rabbinic texts. Apparently, he only appears a handful of times within the Mishnah. We don't really know a lot about him aside from he lived maybe 1st, 2nd century of the Common Era. So he says, he kicks off, gaze or really study or really concentrate on three things and you will not come to transgress. Okay, interesting. You will not come to a transgression. So what are these three things that you should really focus on? Okay, these three things to focus on and to avoid transgression are: know whence you came, or know where you come from, whither you walk, or whither you go, or where are you going, and before whom you will ultimately give judgment and an accounting, as it were. Okay, very interesting. All right, so let's go back. Know whence you came. Where'd you come from? Where are you going? And who are you currently standing? Or actually, no, before whom will you ultimately, eventually give judgment and basically be judged, a consideration. Really fascinating. This really fits in, at least the structure of three things really fits in so far of what we've, for the most part, have seen throughout the first two chapters of Avot, a tripartite statement. What's really fascinating is he's not just content to tell you these three things, he then goes and explains them. So here we go. Whence you came, where'd you come from? From a putrid drop. Whither are you going? Where are you going? You're going to a place of dust, of worms, of maggots. And before whom you stand. And then before whom will you stand to ultimately give judgment and be reckoned into consideration? Before the King of all before the King of Kings, the Holy One, blessed be He. Okay, wow. This is not, I don't know what you were expecting, definitely not what I would have been expecting. So, I would have expected the first two: where'd you come from? Where are you going? We're talking about where we came from in life. What circumstances were you born into? How were you raised? What did you do? Where are you going? Oh, where am I going? Well, gee, I have these plans. I have these aspirations in my life. This is what I would like to do. And then, you have the third piece of it, which is before who will you give who will you give testimony or judgment? Okay, so that's an interesting way of putting into perspective those first two. But he takes it in a very different direction in his explanation. His very different direction is to talk about, and certainly in the first two, is to talk about these very base, it's not about you as a person or as a personality. No, he talks about you as just simply another human, not only just a human being, but a living being. Just as a living being, you came from a drop, you're going to be dust and ashes, nothing. I think the point of these first two is to really put us in our place and provide some humility to us. We ultimately, it's tough. Really what Akavia ben Mehalalel is saying, it's interesting because for me, in what I would have perceived, these are interesting ways to think about who we are, what we want to be, but that doesn't always necessarily prevent us from transgressing. What Akavia ben Mehalalel is advocating is to say, when you consider yourself, first, certainly for his first two of you came from a putrid drop, you're going to be dust and ashes. I think for him, what prevents one from transgressing is that humility, that we are just not even human beings, just simply merely living beings. So who are we? Of course, that could give rise to someone else to say, okay, so I'm just another living being. Let me just go and transgress. But the interesting part, the corrective of that is his third piece of ultimately we will all stand before the King of Kings, before the King of the Kings of the Kings. It's a very heightened language. The King of Kings, King of Kings of Kings. And of that, we will ultimately have to stand before the Holy One, blessed be He. That, I think, is the key piece of his three aspects here, of ultimately what we do while we're here on this earth. We do have to consider how to answer for who we are, what we've done in front of the King of Kings. So, thank you so much for listening to this very first text in the third chapter, and I hope you come along for the ride. All right, thank you so much for watching.